How much? I'm out here. I'm at the Ritz in Orlando. I stepped outside for my article. I'm out by the pool. So if you hear a bunch of kids screaming, it's a lot of the coaches'
Yeah.
kids here.
Tell them to quiet
They just hang
down.
out at the pool all day.
I thought you'd be
Yeah, we'll tell
swimming
them to
in the
quiet down.
pool, or I thought there'd be like water nearby. I mean, there's water there. I thought you'd be maybe swimming.
Well, I don't have a waterproof laptop, and you guys rely on me to produce some content
That's
here.
true.
So first I got to finish the work, and then at that point, maybe you'll find me there.
Yeah, take us behind the curtain a little bit, because I've seen you several times. One time in Costa Mesa, I was at a very trendy happy hour spot having a cocktail, and you saddle up right next to me with your laptop, and you're banging out a long story. You did it in Vegas as well, as I recall, at a sushi place. You like to put on the Ritz, you like to go somewhere where your mind is clear and people are having fun to write these long stories you write sometimes?
Well, if I remember correctly, that was in the joint practices with the Chargers in Costa Mesa, and it was at North Italia. I love that place, North Italia, and they've got really good affogato. And it was I don't like to have affogato. You know, I'm Italian too, so
I know,
I don't like
Lombardi. I know.
Yeah. I don't like to have affogato after like 3 p.m. So this was perfect. They got done with those practices in the morning, and I needed a little boost, and it was kind of hot outside, so I got the affogato, and I was just working. In Vegas, I was just desperate to get off the bus because the Niners hotel was like an hour away from everything. We got off the bus at Mandalay Bay, and I needed to work. I couldn't like run all the way back to my room. So I needed to get a beer, and I needed to work. And then I didn't know you guys were all there partying right next to me. I couldn't get any work done, but it all worked out.
You banged it out. So how hanging was Kyle this morning? We thought he'd be hanging because it's a 7:45 in the East in Florida, 4:45 our time. He likes to go out the night before with the coaches at the party. But he seemed pretty strong today. How hanging was Kyle this morning?
Yeah, I thought that Shanahan was in better shape than he had been in years prior for the 7:45 morning. Now, I don't know if the media members were in great shape, but it was, it's the toughest day game after night game in the entire NFL season is the coach's breakfast at 7:45 coming off of the NFL annual meeting party the night before, especially if you're on Pacific time and you're in an Eastern time zone owners meeting. And that was the case with this one because we're in Orlando. Last year was in Phoenix, so it was a lot easier. But Shanahan handled it well, and he talked a lot. I mean, talked for 30 minutes, covered a lot of the roster, talked about the coaching change at the top of the defense, Nick Sorensen, and obviously adding Brandon Staley. And he also discussed the overhaul of the 49ers defensive line. This is the biggest overhaul that we've seen under this regime. They've had to replace about 2,000 snaps. And he thinks they got a lot more beef on the inside. He likes the differing body types that he now has with Malik Collins and Jordan Elliott, the two defensive tackles, really replacing, for all intents and purposes, Eric Armstead and Javon Kinlaw. They actually think that this is going to make the 49ers better against the run, which I think is really important. So he was talking about that, talking about Brock Purdy. April 15th, guys, that's the big date. That's when Shanahan and Purdy are going to start working together again, and this is going to be Purdy's first full offseason in the NFL.
Yeah, that's big. And like you said, he did. He talked about a lot of different things, offensive line, defensive line, safeties, having a draft pick in the first round. I mean, there was a ton of different stuff, but everybody wants to talk about the same thing, which is Brandon Aiyuk. And I thought it was kind of funny that they kind of met up in Cabo, and, you know, whether it's Pittsburgh or Jacksonville, or he put out emojis yesterday, you know, money talks, BS walks, all that kind of stuff. So everybody wants to talk about that. But Kyle, as you know, as well as anybody, he's pretty much honest and to the point. And he kind of said the same thing he said about Debo, that, look, we've talked, everything's going to work out. Do you anticipate, like, basically every other time that they've wanted to keep somebody that they drafted, that this thing works out, and everything else that's been said or emojied or done or rumored, that Brandon Aiyuk is going to get it done? And maybe it's going to take a while, but it's going to get done.
Yeah, you just can't ignore the track record, and the track record is literally perfect so far with guys who they've drafted, who have qualified as A-listers, and I think Brandon Aiyuk is clearly qualified as an A-lister at this point. They've gotten them paid, and I mean, this goes back to George Kittle in 2020, Fred Warner in 2021, Deebo Samuel in 2022, Nick Bosa in 23. they're 4 for 4 at this point. And they also got Trent Williams paid, and he's definitely an A-lister too, although that was a little bit different because this was a veteran, and they were re-signing him to record money at that left tackle position. So the track record is an A-plus for the 49ers, and I think you just lean on that history, lean on the fact that they control the proceedings here at the end of the day. Brandon Aiyuk is under contract with them. I don't think that he wants to sit out a season. And that's generally why the deadline pressure of the season is what gets these things moving. I don't think they want it to take as long. Definitely not as long as Nick Bosa. I think they'd like to get this done even quicker than Deebo Samuel, who missed the first couple days of training camp in 2022. But sometimes it needs to take that long because sometimes to reach that agreement, you need to feel that deadline pressure to get things moving. So we'll see where this ends up on the timing scale, but I don't think that there's any concern really from the 49ers that it won't end up where they want it to be.
All right, as you're hanging by the pool at the Ritz, writing your masterpiece, what are you working on? General notes from everything today, or do you have one theme you're working on?
Yeah, but the theme I'm working on is I just thought, between some of the staff changes that we saw and some of the signings, almost all the signings from the outside were on the defense. So I some of that was just natural flow of contracts, right? Because the 49ers didn't have as many pending free agents on the offensive side of the ball. But I do think that the general theme of where the 49ers have had to make improvements and right the ship this offseason has been on the defensive side of the ball, especially with the run defense. I asked Kyle about that today. He says that teams ran more crack tosses against the 49ers this past season than he had ever seen in his career. And it was a big problem for the 49ers. And I've talked about this a lot, I think, even with you guys. The efficiency numbers show that the run defense dropped from number 2 in 2022 to number 26 in 2023. And when you look at the fact that they replaced Steve Wilkes, that they brought in Brandon Staley to supplement Nick Sorensen, who is trying to bring the defense back to its top 2 level run defense success in 2021 and 22. And when you look at the fact that they've overhauled 2,000 snaps of the defensive line, I think there's the clear commonality there that the 49ers and Shanahan deemed that 2023 was a disappointment defensively. And I think if you look at the overall numbers, when you drop from the top unit in football to about number 12, and you narrowly lose the Super Bowl, and you could have easily lost in the divisional round in the championship game, both games which had subpar defensive performances, I think that's a really fair assessment. So I'm writing about what Shanahan said today, but through the lens of the way that they've reconstructed the defense on both the personnel level and obviously at the coaching level with the new defensive coordinator.
Also, you mentioned from a defensive perspective, that's where they made all their moves. But he does also sound satisfied that, on that right side where everybody is kind of looking and saying that's maybe where they make their draft impact. But he does sound like on the right side, he seems to be satisfied. He liked that they brought back Feliciano. A lot of people are complaining about McKivitz, but he does at least make it sound like he would be okay if that's where they started the season on that right side.
Well, I think that they got to the Super Bowl last year, and they were a fumble recovery away or one bad break away from winning it all with the line that they had. Right? That doesn't mean that the line that they had was great in pass protection. I think both things can be true at once. But this idea that the line was so terrible that this team can get nowhere with this line just is false. It can still get better. So I think that he's looking at this in the gray area, as you should look at all football roster construction projects. And he's saying, okay, we accomplished goal 1 of the offseason, which was to at least retain the offensive line that was good enough to get this team to the Super Bowl and on the precipice of winning it. And if you do that, then you could set yourself up to take bigger swings in the draft, where the 49ers now have a first-round pick for the first time since 2021. And you could use those bigger swings to try to now upgrade the line, because it wasn't really possible to upgrade that line in free agency without paying an exorbitant amount of money. I think that the market for offensive linemen, just because of supply and demand, I think that they were quality offensive linemen, just based on the way that the game is going, are in such shorter supply than defensive linemen, I think it made a whole lot more sense to spend on the defensive side of the ball. They are much more cost efficient there. So, I think the bare minimum for the 49ers was to retain last year's line. And I think Shanahan and Lynch both hinted that they could be wheeling and dealing in that first round, that they could be aggressive early in the draft. And I would not be surprised to see them go after a big fish offensive lineman, because I think they need that for both the short term and the long term if they want to get better up front and if they want to sustain up front, because a lot of those guys aren't under contract for all too much longer. And Trent Williams is going to be 36 years old this next season.
And the big news, obviously, from a league-wide level today is the NFL adopting the hybrid kickoff rule and taking it basically from the XFL, which is interesting. I know you have thoughts on that. Kyle was asked about it. He was going to wait and see how it would impact. The vote was 29-3. The Raiders voted against it. The Packers voted against it, and the 49ers voted against it. You had an interesting idea, and I thought right away, looking at it over the weekend, if it would be adopted, and the day it was, maybe you put your better players back if the injury risk is going to be lower. You're going to have, the guys on kickoff coverage on the plus 40, the other side on kickoff return on the 35. They're not allowed to move at all until the ball is touched or lands. So does it change the personnel you have on that? Is it more bigger guys and linemen as opposed to linebackers and safeties? And would you put McCaffrey and or Debo back? So give me your thoughts. The Niners, one of the three that voted against it, David, but they have to live by these rules now. What do you think they do? What does the league do?
When I just look at the style of play, because the guys aren't getting that running start that they used to, which obviously led to the higher injury rate, I just look at the style. To me, it looks like, you could watch XFL film to see what it looks like. And to me, it looks like a power run setup against, a defense that's selling out on a blitz. Yeah, against a loaded box. So, in my opinion, you put Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey back there as your two return men. You're limited to two return men. 9 of the 11 have to be up near the kicking zone or whatever they call it now. But the neutral zone. Yeah, the neutral zone. So 2 return guys back there, and if I'm not exactly sure how safe or unsafe it's going to be, but I can look at it with my own 2 eyes, and I can see it's not guys, running at each other with 40-yard head starts anymore. So if that's going to be roughly the same type of injury risk as a standard offensive play, then why not put Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey back there? Because when you're running with explosive guys against loaded boxes, that means that there's less safety help, and that means they could break a big one at any given time. So why not give yourself a chance to break a big return? It counts just as much as a play on offense. So I think that this is going to incentivize teams to use their A-list offensive weapons on kick returns. And yeah, even Diamond Lenore tweeted today, I don't know if it was joking or not, but he said, I want to be on kick returns now. And you can't discount the possibility of putting some defensive guys who are playmakers back there, because just the general gist of this is that if there's less of an injury risk, you've got to think about putting your most explosive electric players back there to be able to make the plays that are there to be made now again.
Well, that's what it is. It's a line of scrimmage, basically, is what it is. And when they catch it, then it's in play. It's the setup zone and the landing zone. So the setup zone is the line of scrimmage, and the landing zone is where they catch the ball and where those 2 players are. So it's a line of scrimmage play. And I agree with you. That's what we were talking about before, is you put your 2 guys back there, and that's what I think the NFL wants, is they want an exciting play where it incentivizes teams to put back your players. And I think that's what you do. You put those players back there because it's not the high-speed collision that it was before. That's what I would do. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Now, from a roster construction standpoint, you still have to worry about the punt returner, which is a really specialized position that hasn't changed at all. And they still need to figure something out there. They let Ray McLeod go to Atlanta. Shanahan today mentioned Ronnie Bell, who I thought looked very rough around the edges in his reps at punt return last year. So he's going to have to improve. They're going to have to either, see that happen, sign somebody, or go for somebody in the draft. And I'm really intrigued to see what they do at that spot. But I think they have the answers on the roster already for kick return given these new rules.
Yeah, one other thing, just real quickly to get back over to the defense, and Kyle for the first time spoke since the hiring of Nick Sorensen and Brandon Staley, and it's clear that Nick's going to call the defense, but in Brandon Staley, he's going to game plan, he's going to be involved, and he comes from the Vic Fangio style of defense, whether it was a linebacker coach in Chicago or when he took over as the DC in L.A. or the head coach in L.A. with the Chargers, DC with the Rams. How do you see that changing the Niners defense? It's obvious Kyle likes a four-man front, so you don't see them jumping into a 34 or 52. But might you see more of the zone behind it be a cover 4 and less of a cover 3 and more cloud coverage behind? How do you think having Staley on this staff will change the way the 49ers fundamentally play defense, David?
I know Staley likes the cloud coverage, and I know, and this is probably personnel dependent, but I know that in both LA teams with the Rams and then with the Chargers, he ran what he called the star defensive back. That was his nickname for, well, it was Jalen Ramsey. Did it, yeah, did it with the Rams, and then Derwin James did it with the Chargers. So you had a corner and then a safety do it, but it was basically a Swiss Army knife that he used on the back end, and obviously to great effectiveness with that 2020 Rams defense, which finished at the top of the league. And you had Jalen Ramsey occasionally in the slot, occasionally blitzing, occasionally outside. I mean, he'd just be all over the formation, and it would be a great tool. And the reason I say it's personnel dependent is I think you can't just pick any player to emulate what Jalen Ramsey did so effectively in his prime in 2020 for the Rams. But 49ers do have some talent, and I think more than anything, Kyle Shanahan sat down with Brandon Staley, and to me it seems that interview process was one where Shanahan was upfront with him, and he said, hey, I don't want to bring in a defensive coordinator from outside the building. I'm probably going to go with Sorensen, but why don't we talk about what you can infuse into this defense idea-wise from the position of, almost a special consultant. He's going to be there on the whiteboard during the weeks. He's going to be big-time game planning. But he's not going to be the coordinator. So really it's an evolution from last year where they brought in Steve Wilks with the new ideas, but he was in a different role. He was in that coordinator role. Now they're going to be infusing the ideas from a less risky position, I guess you could say, right? Because it didn't really work well meshing with Wilks last year. And that's what Staley's going to be charged with doing. But maybe it's going to allow him to be very, very creative. Maybe he's going to bring his own variation of what, we saw the star with the Rams and the Chargers. Maybe he'll bring something else that fits specifically with the personnel.
Well, Justin Simmons is available, David, and I know Kyle kind of downplayed what that extra safety would be, but Justin Simmons can play that role, and obviously he was in Denver, and Fangio coached him there. Do they have enough money? Do you think there's any interest in bringing in somebody like Justin Simmons to play the star?
I think there is, and I tried to ask Lynch about it, and Shanahan talked a little bit about it today. They're definitely interested in adding another safety, just for, at the very least, depth purposes, because Talanoa Hufanga is coming off the torn ACL. Jair Brown's going to be a second-year player. I mean, the numbers just dictate that you want one more guy there. They've already hosted 2 free agents in Rayshawn Jenkins and Julian Blackmon, who are both starting caliber players at the safety position. But I think Justin Simmons is the big fish out there. And one thing that John Lynch did know yesterday was that the safety market has taken a beating this offseason. Just hasn't been a good offseason for safeties. So their salary cap situation is tight. But if they can get one of these guys at a team favorable rate, which the longer this goes on in the offseason seems increasingly possible, then I absolutely think they would be interested in somebody like Justin Simmons. Nobody in the NFL has more interceptions than Justin Simmons since 2018. He's got 30 picks, all pro caliber player. He's 30 years old now, but I think that he's got at least a couple really good years left. And it's going to be mighty interesting to see if the 49ers can sign either him or sign one of these other guys, somebody like Julian Blackmon, who has put some good football on tape. Blackmon's best season was last year with the Colts. So that is a position where Shanahan today was on the record saying the 49ers would still like to add a body. The question is, do you add somebody that's a splash, or do you add somebody that's simply going to compete for a starting job?
Great stuff. Appreciate you giving us that audio. Great stuff. We always appreciate it, and enjoy your time now. We appreciate
Yeah,
that.
thank you.
Yeah, we'll talk to you soon.